good afternoon to you all. First of all, I would like to thank ASAP and all the coordinators for the initiative of starting online sessions, especially through the lockdown situation. So today, I will be covering the first module of the subject History of Architecture 3 for the fourth semester BArch students under APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. And the module name is Early Christian Architecture. So before we move into the subject, I thought we should look into the different modules that we are covering in this particular subject. We will start with Early Christian Architecture, which is in module 1, followed by Byzantine Architecture, Romanesque Architecture, Gothic Architecture, Renaissance Architecture, Baroque and Rococo, and finally, we have church architecture in Kerala. And if you have noticed in the syllabus, module 5 is having both Renaissance architecture, Baroque, and Rococo. Today, we are focusing on the first module, which is early Christian architecture. Now, you being students, all of you might be having a doubt that why do we need to study history? Especially you had studied social sciences or social studies during your school days, history, geography, maybe till the period of 10th grade, and after 12th standard, you have joined for BArch, and you'll be wondering why do we need to study history? I also had the same doubt myself as an architecture student way long back. But the actual reason is history traces the changes in architecture through various traditions, regions, overarching stylistic trends and dates. It tells us about the culture, advancement of technology, materials, forms, functions, building science, and all other possible technical and non-technical fields in the past. Also, it guides us to mold ourselves for present and do developments for future. As you have already studied in your first semester, the Indus Valley civilization, the Egyptian civilization, all of them had done a wonderful job. And that is why we are evolving even currently in the modern era. Before we go into the architecture part of it, when you study history, you should have a basic understanding about the culture and development of that particular subject. That's why I have initial few slides where I'll be focusing on the development of Christianity in the world, how this particular religion came into existence, and what all major events happened in the whole religion. Most of you might be already knowing it, but it's just a recap of what Christianity is about. To introduce Christianity, as we all know, it's world's biggest religion with about 1 billion followers worldwide. And it is based on the teachings of Jesus Christ, who lived in the Holy Land 2000 years ago. Christians are monotheistic, that means they believe there is only one God. The essence of Christianity revolves around the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Christians believe God sent his son Jesus, the Messiah, to save the world. And we do believe that Jesus was crucified on a cross to offer the forgiveness of sins and was resurrected 3 days after his death before ascending to heaven. We all have seen the recent Easter in the COVID days. And the cross is a symbol of Christianity, and the Holy Bible includes important scriptures that outline Jesus' teachings. This particular image shows you Jesus on the cross, and you might have wondered what is INRI or INRI. The acronym INRI represents the Latin inscription, which in English translates to Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. Whether do you believe in Christianity or not, or Jesus' divinity, it is hard to deny that he was probably the most influential person who have ever lived. And you should always remember that his lifetime was only for 33 years, and that too, his ministry lasted only 3 years. Even then, he had a mind-blogging effect on the world history. Now, that clearly makes it a sense that even during 3 years of his ministry, he was having so much of followers, and that made a big impact or a grudge on the Romans and the Jews authorities, and they were not very comfortable on Jesus' popularity. They didn't like the idea of somebody gaining power and prestige, so they considered Jesus as a potential threat. The term Messiah is conceived differently in Christianity and also in Jewish. If you understand the meaning of Messiah in Judaism, Messiah would be a political and a military leader, a new king that would reunite Israel and defeat its enemies, especially the Romans. So obviously Romans didn't like such a task. Messiah in Malayalam we call Mishiha. Accordingly, we all know the story. Jesus was crucified due to trumped up charges. This particular painting is a famous one by Giambattista Tiepolo, and the name of the painting itself is Crucifixion. And once when Jesus was crucified, he had several followers or apostles who carried out the task or the mission of spreading the religion, Christianity. And one of the famous apostle was Apostle Paul, or we call him Saint Paul. This particular painting is an oil on canvas by El Greco of Saint Paul. Paul visited a number of locations, starting churches in different cities. Now, if you are not clear on what an apostle is an important early Christian teacher or a pioneering missionary. In Malayalam, we call Suvisheshakan. So this particular map shows the entire journey of Paul in spreading the missionary. So as you see, the red lines are the initial journey which he had done through Cyprus, Pamphylia, Lycaonia, Seleucia. And the blue line shows the second trip that is much more bigger through the Aegean Sea. And the purple lines depicts his third journey. So he started expanding the missionary. And he reached Rome as well. Another famous painting by Raphael, which shows the detail of St. Paul preaching in Athens, where he was having an argument with Stoic and Epicurean philosophers in Acropolis, Athens. And obviously, were not supportive of Christianity, and they were irritated with the whole situation. And Emperor Nero Chakravarti, he was the one who executed St. Paul in Rome. Another painting by Paul Enric Simonet, which shows beheading of St. Paul. Even after all these issues happened, Christianity was, being suppressed, or people were trying to fight with Christians, and Romans were trying to make Christianity suppressed. But there came an existence of something called Pax Romana. Pax Romana means Roman peace. It was a period of relative peace and stability across the Roman Empire, which lasted over 200 years, beginning with the reign of Augustus. So Augustus Caesar is the one who started with Pax Romana. But the idea of Pax Romana was not only accepting other religions, they wanted Roman gods also to be worshipped by other religions. If you have a separate god, it's fine with us, but you should worship Roman gods as well. Also, you had to recognize worshipping Caesar as well. So this became a very difficult task for the monotheistic people like Christians. For polytheistic people, this was okay kind of a thing, but for monotheistic religion like Christianity, it was a total no. Obviously, the problem wasn't that Christians had their own God, it is that they didn't recognize or worship the Roman gods. So because of all this, Romans had a superstition that Roman gods are not being taken care by everyone, and they believed that gods could turn their backs on Rome. So because of these reasons, Christianity started spreading in secret areas like underground chambers, sewers, caves, etc. So Christians were forced to meet in secret areas where they were not allowed in the public. This particular photograph is showing the drawings on a cave wall in British Museum. So as we mentioned, since Christians were meeting in secret, this only increased the misconceptions of Christians. Rumors swirled that they were engaged in depraved acts like sexual depravity, child sacrifice, even cannibalism due to misunderstanding communion. And Romans were obviously suspicious of these strange folks because they know that these people are meeting in secret areas. And they started with persecution. Persecution in Malayalam we call Ubadra. And Emperor Nero even blamed Christians for the great fire in Rome because Christians were good scapegoats that time. So they were being barbarically tortured throughout. The succeeding emperors like Vespasian and Trajan did not worry much about Christians, but still they were not supportive of Christians. So this another painting, A Torches of Nero by Henry Semedit, is one which shows that Christians are being used as torch lighting people in the Roman Empire. So as the Roman Empire starts its decline, Romans blamed Christians for their difficulties, and more people were crucified, some were killed alive, burnt alive, and some were killed in the arena. And Christians were totally against the act of gladiatorial games. You might have seen Colosseum and all those kind of arenas, which were meant to be for different art forms, but most of these places were also used for killing Christians. This one is showing that people are being watching where Christians are being tortured. When put in the arena, the popular method was to be killed by animals. Man-eating tigers, leopards, lions were left free, and Christians were standing in the arena and they were killed by these wild animals. And a problem what Romans faced during this stage was Christians started welcoming death and the chance to be martyred. Christians took joy in death, which the Romans found unfathomably bizarre. They didn't know why this thing is happening. And this particular image is a painting from of Christian martyrs in the Colosseum. As you see in the image, you can see that people standing with a cross, and even children and pregnant ladies and old people are being forcefully sent into the arena by the soldiers from the Roman Empire, where they are being awaited by wild animals. And this particular painting, which is by Jean Leon Jerome, is this Christian martyr's last prayer. It shows an arena where the Christians are being in a group prayer and the lion is waiting to attack them. And in the background, you can see that few of the Christians are being crucified and some of them are burnt alive. And the very saddest part is there are umpteen number of viewers who are viewing this very barbaric or rude act. Even I can see that around 5 or 6 levels of arena where people are being crowded and watching this particular thing. Now, you being architecture students, think about the space, the circular space. There are underground chambers from where the animals are being coming out. And in the previous picture where I've shown, you can see that there are rooms next to these arena where Christians were imprisoned, and the columns, the colonnaded spaces, maybe for the higher officials on the upper area. And in the backdrop, you can see the Temple of Athena or something like that. So the Roman Empire is also clearly shown by the painter. Wonderful painting. So because of all this torture and struggle, Christians started moving out to different places. And one of that space is called Cappadocia or Cappadocia. They went to extreme lengths to avoid persecution, such as at Cappadocia. Cappadocia are labyrinth of caves Christians carved into a mountain and they went underground. It was 18 stories deep and had miles of tunnels, and the complex housed around 20,000 people who rarely left the underground system. I think in the current situation, we all can understand because we are also in a lockdown situation. But they do had wonderful facilities in the Cappadocia area where they have living quarters, they had grape juicing rooms, they had churches, ventilation shafts, wells, etc. And they also had secret doorways that closed tight from the inside. These are few images which shows the interior as well as exterior of Cappadocia. Another section which shows Cappadocia and its different levels. If you see there are even wells from their underground chambers. Water is being taken for the use of people in Cappadocia. This is an artist impression of Cappadocia. As you see, the city is in the upper level, and the underground chambers also had animal rearing spaces. They have service area, the children playing area. They have the living space. They have the kitchen. Everything is there in this underground city. So despite the Roman attempts to use brutal force to stamp out the Christians, the religion still continued to spread. Now, the five major reasons why Christianity spread because it embraced all people, especially men, women, slaves, poor, and nobles. It gave hope to the powerless, especially the deprived ones, and it appealed to those who were repelled by the Roman extravagance. It offered personal relationship with a loving God because Jesus, the major philosophies and sayings by Jesus were all to love each other, and it also promised eternal life after death. So after all these issues, Christianity became an official religion with the help of Emperor Constantine. You might have heard Constantine the Great. So he ended persecution and all the brutal fight to Christians and legalized Christianity in the famous Edict of Milan. So this particular Edict of Milan was a letter or a treaty signed by Roman emperors Constantine and Licinius. So they proclaimed religious toleration in the Roman Empire, and the letter was issued in February 330 AD, stopping persecution of Christians. This particular image is the statue of Constantine the Great in York Minster Cathedral. I will be coming back to this particular image later on, maybe at the end of this presentation. And Emperor Constantine was a Roman emperor, and he later on he became a Christian. Now, this particular image is showing the busy Roman city and what is happening underneath. These are called catacombs. So the next topic what we are covering is catacombs. Catacombs is there is a part of the new syllabus. Catacombs of Rome. Catacombs are subterranean human passageways. So we have already discussed that Christians were not allowed to come in the common public and discuss about the religion. So they had to go into secret chambers. Cappadocia was their, spaces where they used to stay there and they had to practice Christianity. But catacombs were subterranean human passageways, and they were actually burial chambers. Romans were more into cremation, whereas Christians believed in burial. So this burial resulted in catacombs. Catacombs were initially used as burial chambers, but later on, Christians used to meet in catacombs for prayer services and strengthen Christianity. Usually, catacombs were associated with Christianity because the Christians held services in the catacombs while they were still persecuted by the Romans. This is particular image showing a catacomb. You can see a lot of niches on the floor and on the walls. These are burial chambers. Another catacomb in Italy. Most of these structures are still open in the modern days for the tourist. The construction of catacombs were very unique. Actually, Christians were given a particular land or a plot for designated as a cemetery. So what they have done is, from the surface of that particular land, they had cut stairs, like you see in this picture. Here, stairs are being cut on the uh, ground, and rows of niches are arranged, like you see in the second image. Rows of niches are arranged on the sides of galleries sealed with slabs of terracotta. So this particular image is showing a catacomb of Priscilla. So when a space is filled, or one particular level is filled, they dig underneath and go to another level. And they reinforce each of these levels with arches and walls to prevent landslides. So instead of going horizontally, they try to prefer to dig more levels one by one. And that makes it a point that oldest graves are in the upper levels and newest ones are in the deeper level. On the right hand side, you can see a section which shows different levels of catacombs. And the poor people who followed Christianity, they were actually placed in these walls called loculi. This is a particular term, maybe you might have to remember for the exam. So loculi are holes cut in the walls where bodies are placed inside. This is for the poor people. And the wealthy people were buried in mortuary chapels called cubicula. So the terms loculi, cubicula. As you see, this is extravagant. In the previous image, it looks like a very simple shelf kind of a structure where wealthy people are being buried in huge chapel kind of a space called cubicula. It had wall paintings in it, extravagant. So they have small retirement area built under an arch, and chambers are coated with plaster and painted. That is cubicula. Also, they have an arched niche, as you see here. This is called arcosolium. Arcosolium that could contain a burial, usually found within a cubicle. And they also have frescoed chapels for the prayers, which is called the crypt. So remember the terms loculi, cubicula, arcosolium, and crypt. And Jesus was the prominent figure in most of these paintings, as you see. There is also another term which you have to remember is lunate. Lunate is a semicircular upper part of an arcosolium. So this whole portion is called an arcosolium. This semicircular upper portion is called lunate. And figures have shown arms stretched out in prayer. If you see in the right hand side image, you can see people were standing in prayer mode. Most of the paintings inside catacombs were actually depicting biblical stories in biblical art forms. This particular map showing different catacombs in Paris, showing another section of the catacomb, the image of catacomb. This one is painting mosaics and relief on the sarcophaguses and minor arts, which basically depict biblical stories from the Old and New Testament. This one, the one below, is the one which is in Noah's Ark. And this one showing Catacomb of Priscilla, which shows Jesus as a good shepherd. Now, we'll talk about the major origins and development of church building. So initially, as we discussed, people were forced to stay underground for religious practices in secret chambers. But later on, when Christianity, during Pax Romana and all, Christianity were having a little bit of freedom. And simplest church buildings started coming up. So a single meeting space built up locally available material were initially constructed. And the initial plan of these churches were mostly rectangular and circular. Simple churches were initially made of mud brick, split logs, or rubble, which is vernacularly available. And later on, church congregations from the 4th century onwards started increasing, and they wanted a permanent and aesthetically pleasing building. Later on, when you talk about especially Baroque and Rococo, the tradition where congregations and local leaders have invested time, money, and personal prestige into buildings, so the buildings or churches become extravagant. Remember in the first slide, we talked about different modules that we are studying. So we're starting with early Christian architecture where Christians were deprived of places of worship. But at the end, you're talking about Rococo or Baroque or Gothic, where Christians tried to bring heaven on earth. The church interiors were so extravagant, as you see in the last image here. So the main characteristics of early church building, there were 5 different types of early church building: the house church, the atrium church, the basilica, the bema, the mausoleum church, and the cruciform plan church. We'll be going through all these details. House church. So again, we have discussed they were underground, they were not in the public. So gradually they started coming in the upper ground. They were still scared of Romans. They were not they were not very completely confident that they will not be attacked by Romans. So the house churches were initially designed like a normal house will be, and they tried to practice the religion inside. So this is a particular plan of a house church in Jura Europos in Syria. The house church was set up in an upper class home, typical of the Roman Empire. And the structure consists of a large housing courtyard. You can see a courtyard in the center and a pool which has a baptistry. So I'll explain in detail. This is the entrance to the house. Then they have a huge courtyard. The yellow portion is a courtyard. They have an assembly room. They have a teaching area of the religion. They have a baptistry. And they also had stairs to upper levels. So this is a perspective view which shows the courtyard, the assembly room, the teaching area, the baptistry, the stair area, and the entrance. So from exterior, it mostly looks like a normal house. It was not extravagant like how a church would be in the modern era. Same image. And one more picture which I've added is a house church, the, the, the baptistry area. And this one is Dura Europa's house, the remains of Dura Europa's house in Syria. And on the right hand side, a room kind of a space, what you see is the chapel. The second type is atrium church. As you know, Christianity started during the Roman era, and Roman buildings all had courtyards or atriums. So the same is exemplified in the atrium church. So atrium church or a courtyard church has a huge courtyard with colonnades around it. The third one is basilica. The word was originally used to describe an open Roman public court building, but by extension, it was applied to Christian buildings of the same form and continues to be used. But currently, basilica is a term which is given for large and important church that has been given special ceremonial rites by the Pope. The next type is bema. As the clergy, the number of clergy increased, small apps, they have a small area for the altar or the prayer area. The small area was not sufficient enough for the prayer because they wanted to keep the sacramental bread and wine where Holy Communion was offered. So what they did was they extended the space called the bema. A raised platform or a raised dais was added. That is called a bema. And in this particular example, which I've shown in the plan, is of old St. Peter's Basilica. Here, the bema is extending with two extensions on the left and right, which looks like a T-shaped plan. Now, if you are not clear on clergy, the term clergy are formal leaders within established religions. In Malayalam, we call Purohitanmar. അപ്പം പുരോഹിതന്മാരുടെ എണ്ണം കൂട്ടുന്നതിനനുസരിച്ച് ഓൾട്ടറിന്റെ സ്പേസ് വലുതാക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി ആ ഓൾട്ടറിൽ ഇരിക്കുന്നവരെ കൂടുതൽ പേർക്ക് കാണാൻ വേണ്ടി ബെമ എന്നുള്ളൊരു റേസ്ഡ് ഡയസ് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയതിനാണ് ബെമ സെന്റർ. That yellow portion is bema. And fourth type is mausoleum church. Mausoleum was mostly in the Muslim architecture, but in Christian architecture also, some of the churches had mausoleum churches where a sarcophagus was kept. Now, what is a sarcophagus? Sarcophagus is a stone coffin, typically adorned with sculpture or inscription and associated with ancient civilization of Egypt, Rome, and Greece. Famous ആയിട്ടുള്ള പുരോഹിതന്മാരുടെയും അപ്പോസ്റ്റൽസിന്റെയും സാർക്കോഫാഗെ കീപ്പ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ചേർച്ചസിന് ഒരുപാട് pilgrimage ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു അന്നത്തെ കാലത്ത്. Now let's go into the parts of an early Christian basilica. This is an isometric view of an early Christian basilica. This is again a very important topic, might come for the exam. Describe the different parts of an early Christian basilica. So I'll go one by one. This is a plan showing an early Christian basilica. Let me describe the three important portions here. Number one, propylaeum. Propylaeum is an entrance way to the building, or it's like a gatehouse. You see, it's a gatehouse. Item number one is propylaeum. Item number two is atrium, which we already discussed in early Christian, Byzantine, and medieval architecture. The forecourt of a church is called atrium. Most of the atriums had a fountain in it. Third one is called a narthex. Narthex is an entrance hall or a porch proceeding to the nave of the church. അപ്പം നമ്മൾ ഏട്രിയത്തിൽ നിന്ന് ചർച്ചിനകത്തേക്ക് കയറുന്ന സ്പേസിനെയാണ് നാർതെക്സ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. So if you, as you see in this particular isometric view, gatehouse or propylaeum, atrium with a fountain, narthex. Now let's discuss about item number 4 and 5. 4 is nave, the central portion. When you go into a church, the central hall area where you can actually see the altar and maybe the cross That particular hall area is called the nave, the grand central space in the church. In longitudinal churches, it extends from the entrance to the apse. We'll come to know what an apse is in the coming slide. Now, when you have a central nave, on both the sides of the nave, after the columns, there are spaces which are called side aisles on the left and the right. Bigger churches will have two side aisles on the left and two side aisles on the right, or maybe three. So these are like the corridors running parallel to the nave of a church and separated from an arcade or a colonnade. Again, as you see the isometric view, these are the side aisles. Now let's go to item number 6 and item number 7, crossing and transept. Crossing, when we discussed about Dema, crossing is this particular area in which where the transept and the nave intersect. 4 is nave and 7 is transept. Transept and nave കൂടി ഒത്തു വരുന്ന joining portion ആണ് crossing എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. Transept is in a cruciform plan, the whole arm set at right angles with the nave. So note that the transept appears infrequently in early Christian architecture. Old St. Peter's Basilica is one of the examples which has transept. So this particular isometric view shows transept. Now, item number 8, apse. Apse is a recess, sometimes rectangular, but usually semicircular on the walls. As you see here, a small semicircular depression or a niche on the wall is called an apse. Apse in the Roman Basilica frequently contained an image of an emperor and was where the magistrate dispensed laws. In early Christian Basilica, apses contained the cathedra or throne of the bishop and the altar. So it's a very prominent place. It's a place towards where you direct, the direction of prayer is towards the apse. So this particular image shows apse. So always remember these important terms: gatehouse or propylaeum, atrium with a fountain, narthex, nave, side aisle, crossing, transept, apse. Now, we also have two more terms: nave elevation and clerestory. Nave elevation is a term which is used to refer to the division of the nave wall into various levels. In the early Christian basilica, nave elevation usually is composed of nave colonnade or arcade and clerestory. So, when you look towards the side aisles, that particular elevation is called nave elevation. It might have different levels where it shows different windows and it shows a different colonnades or arcades. So that has been shown, depicted as nave elevation. Clerestory are rows of windows in the upper part of a wall. In churches, the clerestory windows above the roof of a side aisle permit direct illumination of the nave. Let's see, these are clerestory windows. Upper level കാണുന്ന ഇത്തരമുള്ള വിൻഡോസിനാണ് clerestory windows എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. And in most of the churches, clerestory windows are not operable. അത് പലപ്പോഴും access ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റാത്ത സ്ഥലത്തായിരിക്കും. So these are fixed windows. When you study Gothic architecture later on, you will understand that most of these clerestory windows act as wonderful decorating pieces of art where stained glass is being used for those kind of churches. And stained glass, they try to depict biblical stories. It made a wonderful dramatic effect into the interiors of churches during that time. So these were the important terms. Now let's go into Latin and Greek cross. Most of the cathedrals had a cruciform ground plan. Now, what is cruciform? Cross in the shape of a plan cruciform ground plan. And in churches, the plan is usually longitudinal. As you see, this one is called a Latin cross. A Latin cross is a type of cross in which vertical beam sticks above the cross beam as a main representation of cross by which Jesus Christ was modified. Latin cross. So there were plans which were like this. If you remember, you have seen St. Peter's Basilica plan, that was a Latin cross plan. Now, what is Greek cross? Greek cross plan is a square plan. So it has all the arms of equal length and not much longer than its width. So often the arms curve wider as they go out. So here, most of the churches which has a Greek cross plan, ഈ ക്രോസിന്റെ നടുവിലുള്ള ക്രോസിംഗ് സ്ഥലത്തിന്റെ മുകളിൽ they try to put domes, surmounted domes were added. That is one major a thing which you will study in Byzantine architecture, where domes were added. Now, this particular example is the Cathedral of Uppsala in Sweden, and you can see which kind of a plan it is. Yeah, it is a Latin cross plan. This is a square plan. Dora Church in Istanbul, which has a dome. It's a Greek cross plan. Another two examples, Church of Saint Sava, Greek cross, Latin cross, St. Paul's Cathedral in London. So I hope it is clear. Now, the predominant building that we will be studying for this particular module of early Christian architecture is St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. This image, what you're seeing, is the current St. Peter's Basilica. You all might have seen, at least in the news channels, where the Pope comes and wishes the people and blesses the people during Easter and Christmas. So this particular St. Peter's Basilica, which is currently existing, that particular place had an old St. Peter's Basilica. So it's in Vatican City, an enclave in Rome. You will be actually studying the modern St. Peter's Basilica also in this semester, because towards the end of the semester module, like Renaissance and all, you have this modern St. Peter's Basilica also in the syllabus. This one is the old St. Peter's Basilica. The same spot where the current St. Peter's Basilica is standing. This is the old St. Peter's Basilica. Now, when you relate it to the Basilica church details, you can see there is a front portion which is propylium, that is a gateway. This is a propylium. Then we have atrium. There is a fountain in it. This is a narthex in it. And as you see the isometric view, you can feel that there is a central nave. There are two side aisles, the bigger side aisle and the smaller side aisle. Again, on the left-hand side also, it is something like that. And you can see the transept, crossing, apse would be also there. It's not very clear. This one is a bell tower. And here, what you see is an obelisk. So, old St. Peter's Basilica was the building that stood from 4th to 16th century on the spot where the current St. Peter's Basilica stands. Before we talk about old St. Peter's Basilica, we should have an idea on what Circus of Nero or Circus of Caligula is. The Circus of Nero, Circus of Caligula was it is again kind of an arena which was done by Nero for horse and chariot racing in ancient Rome. Remember, we had seen an obelisk in the previous image. Have you seen this particular obelisk on the left hand side? Yes. So this particular obelisk and the central obelisk here in Circus of Nero has a relation. So construction of this particular basilica, built over the historic site of Circus of Nero, began during the reign of Emperor Constantine in 300 AD. As we already discussed, Constantine the Great was an emperor who, with the help of Edict of Milan, he stopped persecution of Christians and he started with supporting Christianity. So he is the one who started constructing this particular church. And in the first century, Nero built a circus outside the city used for horse and chariot racing. As you see in the image, you can see. And St. Peter was crucified at that particular obelisk. So that is the importance of that obelisk. St. Peter was crucified and then buried in the adjacent cemetery. So this particular sketch clearly shows that there was only the Circus of Nero and the land was relatively barren. And there was a cemetery next to it, and that's where St. Peter was buried. So when Constantine decided to construct a church, he thought of constructing a memorial church in the honor of St. Peter, which was actually much later. And the ground plan is in the form of cruciform shape. We already discussed. Remember the names: portico, propylaeum, atrium, narthex, nave, side aisles, bema, and cathedra or the throne is there, and the apse. This particular image very clearly shows the three important structures: the Circus of Nero, the old St. Peter's Basilica, the new St. Peter's Basilica. If you can see, the red area is where the old St. Peter, sorry, the Circus of Nero was existing, where you have the obelisk. The yellow portion shows the old St. Peter's Basilica. You can see the cruciform plan. And the green portion shows the current St. Peter's Basilica. So it is all next to each other, the same site. And this particular painting sketch shows the section of old St. Peter's Basilica sideways and a picture of the old front elevation. The Vatican obelisk, as you see in the left-hand side, still standing on the spot where it was erected on the orders of Emperor Caligula in 37 AD. And the atrium, which is known as the Garden of Paradise, stood at the entrance and had 5 doors. Entry towards the main church area was through 5 doors, which leads to the body of the church. So it is an atrium church. We'll go into the section of Old St. Peter's Basilica. So as you know, the space looks pretty big and it was capable of housing 3,000 to 4,000 worshippers at one time. And it consists of 4 aisles and one central nave and 2 smaller aisles at each side, which were each are divided with the help of 21 marble columns taken from earlier Roman buildings. As you see, the red portion is the central nave and the yellow portions are the side aisles. You have a bigger side aisle and a smaller side aisle. And it was over 110-meter long, built in the shape of Latin cross. So the total depth of the structure was 110 meter. And it had a timber roof which stood at a height of 30 meter at the center. This is a particular section of the old St. Peter's Basilica. You might be interested to see why these columns are looking like this. These columns are used in the altar of old St. Peter's Basilica, and these were called as Solomonic columns. Constantine took these columns from the Temple of Solomon and gave them to the church, and that is why we have the name of Solomonic columns. Now, if you define a Solomonic columns are also called as barley sugar column. These are helical kind of structure, as you see in the image. And one very interesting factor of this particular column is it is helical shaped, characterized by spiraling, twisting shaft like a corkscrew. And most of these columns doesn't have a typical capital style. So it could be styled with any kind of design on the top. With that, we are coming to the end of the session. I'll quickly recap on what we had discussed. We talked about Jesus Christ. We talked about rise of Christianity. We talked about persecution. We talked about St. Paul, Pax Romana, Cappadocia, Constantine, Edict of Milan, Catacombs, Loculi, remember, Cubicula, Arcosolium, Crypt, Lunette. And when we talked about early Christian architecture, the origins of early Christian architecture, house church, atrium church, basilica church, bema, mausoleum church, cruciform plan, where we discussed about Latin cross and Greek cross. Parts of a Christian basilica, please remember these terminologies: propylaeum, atrium, narthex, nave, aisle, transept, crossing, apse, clerestory, nave elevation. We talked about Circus of Nero. We talked about Old St. Peter's Basilica. We discussed about obelisk and Solomonic columns. These were the references what I've added. As you all know, Sir Bannister Fletcher's History of Architecture is the Bible of our history. So do refer to that. And I also was very happy to read Early Christian Byzantine Architecture by Richard and Slobodin. One more interesting book which I found was this one, the James F. White and Susan J. White Christian Architecture, Building and Renovating for Christian Worship by Orsel Publications. And remember, when I talked about Constantine the Great, I was showing you that picture and I told you I'll come back to that picture. This particular picture was taken in front of York Minster Cathedral. So it is written, Constantine the Great. Near this place, Constantine was proclaimed a Roman emperor in 306. His recognition of the civil liberties of his Christian subjects and his own conversion to the faith established the religious foundations of Western Christendom. So that is a place where he was proclaimed Roman Emperor in 306. And fortunately, I had the privilege to visit that particular historic place in front of York Minster Cathedral. So that's why I said I'll come back to this image. And thank you.
Sir,
Yes.
there's one question. Can you explain the Cappadocia again once more?
Okay. Cappadocia. Cappadocia, actually, these were underground carved spaces on. I'll directly go to that particular slide.
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
Cappadocia were labyrinth of caves. They were actually caves and carved into the mountain and down into the ground. And it was actually 18-story deep structure where people, as we discussed before, Christians had to live in segregation because in seclusion because they were scared of they being attacked by the Roman people. So they couldn't go out in public and practice Christianity. So because of we discussed about persecution and all the effects of Roman brutality. So few of the Christians ran away and they went into Cappadocia. So Cappadocia was it was kind of a you can see a city under the earth or carved under the earth. So they had everything. They had all the facilities. They had cattle rearing. They had houses. They had churches. They had prayer areas. So all these spaces were carved under the earth or inside the caves. So it's a very famous uh, historical structure. And actually, Cappadocia is not there in the syllabus, but I just added it because out of interest, because it's related to the topic. I got a question here. It's by PG Piju. The question is, can early churches founded by St. Thomas in Kerala also be included in early Christian architecture? Obviously, it can be added as early Christian architecture for Kerala, but Christianity came to Kerala much later, and uh, the uh, the initial structures, what we are focusing in early Christian architecture is only the catacombs and old St. Peter's Basilica. Gradually, when the Christianity started developing, there were more examples like Hagia Sophia in Turkey, then the Pisa Cathedral, they have Notre Dame Church, and again the Cathedral of St. Peter in the current era. So, early Christian architecture, which was, you can say that the example of St. Thomas in Kerala is typical for Kerala early Christian architecture. In fact, the sixth module talks about early Christian architecture in Kerala, but the example buildings will be studying are St. Francis Church in Fort Kochi, Our Lady of Life Mattancheri, and Our Lady of Hope in Vaipi. Thank you for the question. Okay, I got one more question.
Okay, okay.
So can you explain about loculi one more time? Okay, loculi, it's a terminology used for the niches on the walls under the catacomb where the poor people are being buried. As you see, the other terminologies what we have discussed is cubicula for the wealthy people. So on the normal wall of the catacomb, they constructed niches. Like നമ്മുടെ കിച്ചൺ ഷെൽഫിലൊക്കെ കാണുന്ന പോലെ ചെറിയ നിഷസ് ഉണ്ടാക്കി അവിടെ they try to keep the bodies of very poor Christians. That particular kind of niches are why called love to life. Okay, I got one more question. Last slide on Solomonic column, is it only there or somewhere else? Solomonic columns എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് സോളമന്റെ ടെമ്പിളിൽ നിന്ന് എടുത്ത കോളംസിനെയാണ് സോളമനിക് കോളംസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് മോസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ഇറ്റ് ഹാഡ് ഒരു സ്പൈറൽ ഷേപ്പ് ആണ്. ആ ഷേപ്പുള്ള കോളത്തിന് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു പേര് വിളിക്കുന്നു എന്നാണ്. Martin Luther King had done this thing. Why we are studying this? I was very clueless. But when I joined architecture in CET, because of few wonderful teachers I had there, they're still there, most of them. I understood that this is such a wonderful subject, and if you are studying history, understanding the culture, it will be really helpful. Just by going into the building, and if you're studying about Colosseum is a circular structure, and this is what is the material used. Don't just go by the architecture. Understand the basic history on why such a kind of structure is there, the culture behind that. When you studied about Egyptian architecture, I would like to say that why did Egypt had the tombs, the pyramids, and why did it look so massive? You should understand that Egyptians were believers of life after death, and they understood that the normal life is just temporary, and life after death is something extraordinary. That's why they spent their whole money in constructing temples and tombs with rocks and stones, where normal palaces and buildings were made of clay bricks. So we don't have good palaces and uh, residences of Egyptian architecture, but we do have those. So understand their basic culture. Also, if you remember, most of the development happened in Egypt near the river Nile, because water was a good source of uh, life. That's why. And if you see the common building material used by Egyptians, it was mostly sun-dried bricks. Near the river Nile, they had clay soil or marshy soil, so they constructed mud bricks from the clay soil, and that is being used for the normal residential architecture. And the profile of pyramid, why is it pointing towards heaven? Because they believed, oh, it's pointing towards sky. And if you see the geographical depiction of pyramids were mostly kept in the west, because they believe the sun rises in the east, and west is where the life after death comes from. So there's a lot of interconnection between the culture and the histories. I would like to say to all students, try to understand why they have done such a thing in the past. So that will be really interesting to study. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful and informative session. And we are getting some amazing feedbacks from the attendees. Sir, thank you for
Thank you.
associating with Azhar, and we hope to see you again for this platform.
Thank you. Thank you so much.